Hello again. Welcome to this next in the series of Telusk programs that we've been putting out in midweek for everyone in the ministry area. My name is Julian Stedman and I'm standing outside St Edmund's Church. And you'll see something that we haven't seen for a few weeks. The doors are wide open and we're open for visitors for quiet prayer. So do come to the church. I'll be talking in a moment to Anthony Seys Llewellyn about the challenges of opening up our churches and the health and safety issues involved. After that, we are going to have some news from Alison from Tearfund about some of the challenges they're facing at the moment. And then we view another one of Nicci and Jeremy's prayer spaces. And finally, I talk to Dr. Carl, one of our local GPs, about medical and other issues that we're facing during this challenging time.
Well, pretty simply, I'm Health and Safety Officer for the church, which is a very grand title indeed. But we thought the day would come when we would be able to open perhaps for prayer first. And so you start with looking at the fundamentals, people cleaning their hands and keeping distant from one another, not picking up something and putting it down which somebody else is going to pick up to avoid contact and transmission. And of course, in a church which was not entirely designed for COVID-19, with a 5 foot 6 inches wide aisle, it became obvious we just needed to think it through. One-way system, hand gel coming in and going out, restricting the number of places so they could be cleaned before and after, as was sensible, and the little things which we thought were important. Yes, you can put signs saying 2-meter distancing, but can it be discreet? Can we not have a building site with checkered tape? And so we decided that we would cordon off a simple cord the pews which were not available, or the parts of the church where it would be a good idea for people not to go for private prayer, and then just worked through that bit by bit. And what we decided on was thought sufficient by the diocese, who have to approve these things, and we hope that those who do come will find it a quiet, private place for reflection.
Well, Anthony, I see we've got some arrows on the floor. How have you organised the circulation around the church?
Well, it's a one-way system which goes as indicated by arrows. We will keep that when the wonderful day comes that we can open for services and weddings and to assist people in funerals. We will be able to open up the pews, but we may have to do a bit of geometry as to where people sit. And if actors can have a discreet prompt as to where they stand on the stage, I don't see why we shouldn't put some little crosses spaced out so that in the social distancing of the time we can tell people where it's okay to sit. And of course, people in the same household can sit together. We will get there.
Hello, I'm Alison. I represent Tearfund in my local church. Tearfund is an international aid and development agency with a strapline of following Jesus where the need is greatest. And there's plenty of need in the world at the moment, as we know. Lots of the churches in the UK at the moment are providing practical support in their communities. For example, quite a lot of churches host a food bank. And it's similar with Tearfund. Tearfund works through local churches, and it equips and supports local churches to be the hub of communities. Many communities need a lot of support at the moment because they're ill-equipped to cope with something like a pandemic. They haven't got the resources, they haven't got the infrastructure that we've got in our country, for example. So in countries in Africa and India, where the numbers are rising very greatly at the moment, lots of people are suffering severely at this time. Where the virus is spreading in vulnerable communities, it's very difficult for people without the basic health care and all the facilities that people need to cope with the pandemic. Tearfund has launched an appeal, like lots of agencies have done, a coronavirus appeal. And I'd just like to share with you ways in which money given to this appeal is helping. Tearfund is using money in essentially 3 practical ways. In countries where communications are not easy, where people haven't got internet access, television in all the homes, then messages about advice as to how to cope and correct information, correct facts, need to get to people. And that's done through local people going to talk to people and answering questions. But those people need to be employed to do that. Another important area that needs support is hygiene and sanitation. We know that hand washing is important. We know that it helps to prevent the spread of the disease. But in some countries, soap and clean water are not readily available. So Tearfund is one of the agencies that's helping to bring clean water to communities and providing soap and disinfectant so that hand washing can take place. For people who usually live hand to mouth, they go to work, they earn their money, they spend it on looking after their families. Without that source of income during lockdown, during the pandemic, then people are going to be short of food. We've got food banks to help people in this country, and people in poor communities need that even more. So those are the ways in which Tearfund is using money from the appeal. But we may or may not be able to send money, but we can pray. And there are some points here that Tearfund's given for praying through this pandemic for very vulnerable communities. You can pray that the churches fulfill their functions in shining a light in their communities, that false claims, fake news, wrong information that can make people feel afraid and lead to violence. This is happening in some places. So Tearfund's working with church leaders to counter these. So we can pray for peace and that people get the right information and are able to act on it. Lockdown has put a lot of people out of work, pushing them even further into poverty. That results in the food shortages, as we just spoke about. So we can pray for God's provision for the families in need. Social distancing. We find it difficult to remember sometimes, but in places that are crowded, like refugee camps, for example, it's even more difficult, and people need help with that. Safeguarding of women and children isn't always available in a community, and home sometimes isn't a safe place either. So Tearfund and other organisations are working to reach vulnerable people to support them in those safeguarding ways during the crisis. We know that not every country has access to basic healthcare like we have, but the programmes where Tearfund teaches about hygiene and sanitation and helping to keep people healthy help them to cope with the current crisis. If you're able to give money to support this appeal, that's great. But please could you pray? We can all pray. The Tearfund, www.tearfund.org, will give all the information that you need to know. Thank you for listening. Tearfund is only one of many organisations that are helping people to get through this crisis. We know that some countries haven't yet reached the peak, and it may get worse in many places. And we just want to pray and support the people who are on the front line helping poorer communities to get through this. Thank you.
We're just going to pick a few dandelions and a few daisies because we're thinking about the things that have gone wrong, things that didn't go so well. So each thing that maybe went wrong, we'll pick a flower. And then we come in, put the flowers down, and then each stem we're going to make a little hole. Each hole is like a little thing which went wrong. Either something we did wrong, or something someone else did wrong, or something that just went wrong by itself. And then through each hole, through each pierced stem, we'll thread a flower. Each time we make a hole, we're saying, please make this right. Please make this good. Please help me to make this better. And in each hole is a new flower, and each flower is like asking for something good to grow out of what went wrong. And then all the flowers are linked together. And they can be collected together. And you can hold them in your hands. Just hold them in your hands. I think please make the things that go wrong go well. Amen. And then you can just hang them up. And then you walk away. It's done. It's over.
When I'm choosing music for worship, I'm very keen to have lyrics and tunes which enable us to memorise scripture. Hymns help us to express our deepest emotions to God, but they also help us to recall God's promises to us in times of need. This song I'd like to present to you today is called Yet Not I, But Through Christ in Me, and it's written by an Australian church group called CityAlight Music. It's packed full of biblical truth about God's grace, about the gift of Jesus, his Son and our Redeemer, and about the joy, forgiveness, righteousness, freedom, love and peace which come from following Jesus. Just recently I've been reading Tom Wright's reflections on the letter to the Galatians, and Paul says, here I'm reading from Galatians 2, I have been crucified with the Messiah. I am, however, alive, but it isn't me, it's the Messiah, it's Christ who lives in me. And the life I do still live in the flesh, I live within the faithfulness of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Plenty of food for thought as we listen to the words of this song and reflect on Paul's words in Galatians. What gift of grace is Jesus my Redeemer? There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my joy, my righteousness and freedom, my steadfast love, my deep and boundless peace. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus, for my life is wholly bound to His. Oh, how strange and divine, I can sing all is mine, yet not I, but through Christ in me. The night is dark, but I am not forsaken, for by my side the Saviour He will stay. I labour on in weakness and rejoicing, for in my need His power is displayed. To this I hold, my shepherd will defend me. Through the deepest valley He will lead. Oh, the night has been won, and I shall overcome, yet not I, but through Christ in me. No fate I dread, I know I am forgiven. The future sure, the price it has been paid. For Jesus bled and suffered for my pardon, and He was raised to overthrow the grave. To this I hold, my Saviour has defeated. Jesus now and ever is my plea. Oh, the chains are released, I
Well, hi, Carl. How are you?
Hi, Julian. I'm fine. And are you keeping okay?
Yeah, we're keeping very well. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Good.
What do you intend to do? Talk to us about this week then.
Well, after a couple of theoretical chats, I thought, well, it'd be good to get practical today. And so I'm going to start looking at the very practical steps that you can take to build your mental health resilience. And these are things you don't need special training to do them. And they may seem a bit like common sense. They're certainly not rocket science, but they're proven to really help people to build resilience to particularly depression. But they also help with anxiety. And they're good to do when you're well. They help stop you sinking into depression when circumstances get difficult. And if you do find yourself depressed, then there's evidence that they help you to get back out of that depression quicker and stop yourself falling back into it. So they're really important steps, even though they seem simple, and maybe people think, oh, well, we know about this. It's good to be reminded of them. This afternoon, this evening, I wanted to look at the importance of building good relationships and social networks. And how helpful they are in maintaining our mental health. It's very interesting that in the Bible, the very first thing that God says is bad in his world is that, or not good, is that man is alone. And God says it's not good that man should be alone. And that observation tells us that we're wired to face the challenges of life with others, not in isolation. And of course, psychology has picked up on this particularly recently, and it's beginning to teach us that loneliness and isolation have physical effects on our bodies, and also it affects our thinking and our minds and our emotions as well. And so I thought, well, it'd be good to look at how we can take steps to make sure that we don't find ourselves cut off from human contact when we get sick or when we feel low.
Okay, well, building relationships isn't necessarily that easy. I certainly am not sure that I've got very many deep relationships. How do we go about it?
Well, it's not easy for everyone, is it? And some people find it easier to make friends than other people. Some people seem to be naturals at it. We're all unique. And of course, circumstances affect us. We find it easy to make friends when we're up, but perhaps harder when we're down. Some people are more gregarious than others, and they like company. Other people are more solitary. But all of us need other people, and there are times when we all long for human contact. I want to be clear, though, that solitude is a good thing. So we all need time alone. We all need me time. And if you just ask any parent or a busy carer, they'll tell you how important getting time for yourself is. But we can all get too much of this. And there can be times when we feel lonely and isolated, when we're alone and it's not welcome and it's not helpful. And we need the company of other people. And we can feel like a hunger or a thirst for just someone to talk to. There, and that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Okay, Carl, well, thanks for that. But how can we go about building relationships and friendships, especially if we're feeling low as we may be at the moment? Don't friendships just sort of happen?
Well, you can't force friendship naturally, but you can work at building relationships. And often what I think is it starts with us recognizing the importance of it and becoming intentional about it. By the way, you're quite right. It's much harder to do this when you're low. And so I really would encourage people to be investing in relationships now when perhaps you're feeling well, so that they're there for you when you sink into a time of need, when you can draw on your friendships. And in the book of Proverbs, there's a verse which says, there's much food in the uncultivated ground of the poor. And, if you feel a little bit poor in relationships, I often encourage people to think, well, look around you, because that's the uncultivated ground, the opportunity around you. And very often there are friendships there just waiting for you to step into them, if you just notice them. And I get people to look for under 4 headings. Sometimes I even tell them to go and make a little list so that they can really sit down and think about their life. The first one is, can I make a friend of somebody new? Somebody I don't know at all. And that might mean joining a club, or taking up a hobby, or volunteering to help somebody and get involved with a group doing something in the community. And it's quite surprising how many people can be inventive about the ways that they can meet people when they really have to, when you challenge them with that, making new friends. I'm not talking about deep relationships. I'm talking about taking steps to build your circle of friends. And the second one is, how can I get to know somebody better? So we all have people that we know a little bit, you know, a neighbor that we just nod to, or somebody that we meet in the post office, or out when they're walking their dog and we see them, or there's a friend of a friend, or somebody at church that you speak to and but you don't really have a good conversation with. Yeah. And it's really noticing those people and saying, well, can I get to know them a bit better? Can I go out of my way perhaps to have that chat with them and deepen that relationship? And then there's the people, can I get to know someone again? It's surprising how often we lose touch with our friends. You know, we knew these people quite well, or you know, and they moved away, or we quarreled with them, or something happened, and so the relationship's gone. And looking back, we might be finding ways to reconnect with them, even if we've quarreled with them. You know, time has passed, and maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones. Ring them up, ask how they are, say you regret how you parted, and enter into that relationship again. And then lastly, but by no means least, it's investing in the relationships that are around you, what you already have. And look for those relationships which really nourish you. You know, we all know that there are some people and you spend 5 minutes with them and you feel worse than you did before. But there are other people who, when you spend just a few minutes with them, they really lift you up. And try to work out how you can cultivate spending time with those people a little bit more than before. And, you know, if you sit down and just ask those 4 questions to yourself, then you can often make a good list of activities and aims for the next week, of ways in which you're going to build your social network and your friendship groups.
Okay, Carl, well, thank you for that. Isn't it more difficult now because we're not in normal circumstances? In lockdown, we don't get the chance so often to meet up with people in the way we would normally do.
No, we don't get those face-to-face connections like we used to, although there will come a time, I'm sure, when face-to-face contact is back. And I think one of the benefits of lockdown has been that people really value personal contact. So people are very open to invitations to meet up and spend a little bit of time in a garden meeting or in some way, because we come to realize how important human contact is. But I think it's the challenge of lockdown is that things are different. It's not that we don't have the possibility of connection. It's just that it's different sorts of connection. I don't know about you, Julian, but I'm much more IT savvy than I was now, you know, than I was three months ago. I've learned to do Zoom. I've learned to have WhatsApp calls and receive them. And so I think, you know, we can all write letters. We can all lift up the phone and I think it's being intentional at building the relationships in whatever way we can. I haven't seen my mother now or my father for 3 months, but I feel closer to them just because I phone them every day. And I wonder, well, why didn't I do that before? You know, I found that my relationship with them has been built during lockdown rather than adversely affected. And, you know, we're all in a position of just using what we've got more wisely, I think.
So do you have any other advice for people who really struggle to make connections? Sometimes we just find it very difficult, don't we, to converse with people. Is there anything that we can do about that?
Well, I'm not an expert. I think I'm, I think ladies are much better at this than chaps, although, we can all have our different ways. I think that the Bible says, again, in the book of Proverbs, that if you want to have friends, you've got to be friendly. And so we need to cultivate a listening ear. People love being listened to. So if we develop the art of listening to other people and drawing their story out of them, people will like that and they'll want to spend time with us. I think we can avoid grumbling and complaining and feeling sorry for ourselves. Those things are always rather relationship killers. You have to build a relationship quite strong to be able to drive your own misery over it. So I think if we can avoid those things, it's good. And then I think, look, we can all do this. We can look out for others, can't we? There are people around us that we might notice who are lonely, maybe someone with a hearing problem or some other disability, which means they struggle anyway. And if we look out for lonely people and look to give something in our relationships, not just take something and get something for ourselves, then I think that then I'm sure that this epidemic of loneliness and isolation, which has been talked about on the news and which has been really highlighted by COVID, then we can really work to reducing that. So be a good listener, don't grumble too much, look out for those who have needs and give in to them. I think those are tips for being a friendly person. And then naturally, I think, people will be attracted to you.